exchange. We now look at the Forex Focus with Michael Keenan from Absa Capital. Morning, Mike. It's good to have you in at this time, looking at what the Rand's been doing. I've been saying for the last few days that it's been in that band between 990 and 1010. Before that, there was a period of great volatility, going to 30 and coming back to 10.
Yes.
Now it seems to have settled and indeed went to 987 at one point this morning. 989 was the strongest it was yesterday. It does seem to have settled in that kind of band, doesn't it?
I think you're right, David. I think, we're looking at this kind of 50-cent range of 985 up to 1035. That's held since June of this year. And we have been oscillating within that range, oscillating around the psychological 10 Rand level. And I think the market is still recovering from the sort of the bombs that hit the market a few weeks back with Bernanke and the quantitative easing. Of course, we've had the strikes and that in previous months as well. And I think everyone's just waiting for more direction as to what is the Fed going to be doing, what's going to be coming out of China as well in terms of their growth dynamic. I think those are the two key sort of international headwinds that the Rand is facing. And then domestically, we still have lingering labour tensions. I don't think we can get away from that. Electricity supply conditions are still rather tight, especially with Medupi now only coming on next year. And then we've got that thing in the background about the potential downgrade later on this year, which I think also adds to domestic sentiment being a little bit negative. So
just let me pause you there.
Sure.
With Medupi in particular. Did you see a particular reaction with the currency and in other ways to that announcement, or was the market expecting it?
I think it was a really muted response. We didn't see much action in the currency markets, but I think it just makes those supply conditions that much tighter. And if we had to get large-scale outages as a result of the grid just being overburdened, then the Rand would come under pressure. And of course, I think investors are well aware of that. So it's a risk, as would a credit rating downgrade be. It's a risk. We're not penciling it as a base case scenario, but if it were to happen, then that could provide another down leg for Rand depreciation. And that's why, yesterday we put out our latest monthly report, and we're still hanging our hat on sort of a move up to 1050. So this range of 985 to 1035, still very strong, but we think the bias is tilted towards a breach to the top side of that range, and we're calling 1050 by September. And the reason why we're talking about September, that's the end of the wage negotiation season formally in South Africa, and also it's our base case scenario for when the Fed is likely to start scaling back on its quantitative easing from September onwards.
Also, to talk about electricity, it's spring. And if we get through to there, it's been a very mild winter, certainly on the Highveld, which is where most of the power is used. So if we get through with luck, that will make people feel better.
Absolutely. Look, as I say, we don't expect any huge power outages, any load shedding like we saw in 2008. But the situation remains very, very tense.
What about Ben Bernanke? He spoke last week, and we've got to the stage where those words are analysed, picked apart, put in different orders, drained of whatever meaning they could possibly have. He's speaking now to Congress, so this is another opportunity for him to say nothing or something.
Absolutely. So our base case, as I say, they're probably going to start tapering from September, but that tapering is going to be very dependent on A, the data, particularly the labour data that comes out of the States, and B, remarks from Fed officials like the chairman himself, which will, as you said, kick off on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So the market's going to be glued to that. And I think, again, we talk about the Rand stuck in this kind of range. I don't think it's going to deviate from this range until we get more certainty on the Fed. And if he's a little bit more hawkish again, then the Rand's going to weaken. If he proves to be as dovish as he was last week, then perhaps the Rand could strengthen a little bit further. But really, 85 is proving very stubborn, and the Rand bulls out there just are struggling to get through that level.
Of course, when Bernanke, whenever he speaks, people are going to analyse it. So you feel perhaps he shouldn't speak as often as he does, or maybe he wants to speak as often as he does. What about the effect of all this on our MPC? What will they be talking about tomorrow and Thursday?
Yeah, MPC, another critical one. I think another key focus for the Rand this week. No one really is expecting the central bank to actually move on interest rates, but it's, in my opinion, I think what we've got to be looking out for is that sort of long-term projection of the SARB. Remember, we saw some fairly benign sort of inflation trajectories put forward by the SARB at the previous meeting. Inflation expectations from the BER haven't also shot up. But we have seen a big move in the currency subsequent to those developments. And it's going to be key to see whether or not those inflation expectations from the SARB actually have deteriorated and those projections have worsened. Because if we compare the South African situation to what we've seen in other emerging markets, we see in countries like Turkey, like Brazil, they're tightening up on their monetary policy stances. And of course inflation is drifting higher there, but if South Africa's inflation is drifting higher as well, and our central bank doesn't actually tighten, then we could be looking a little bit behind the curve in terms of a real interest rate differential.
Although last time, as I remember, when the inflation numbers, they were surprised actually by staying within the range. So that we'd be looking optimistically at that.
I think so, and this is going to be key. So for me, the most important thing of the speech is really what's their latest update on inflation post this big rand sell-off, because that's going to be critical. I think when it comes to the rand, it's all about those real interest rate differentials. You've got to adjust the interest rates for the inflation rate, and that's how investors tend to compare emerging markets. And remember, South Africa is one of the heavyweights within emerging markets. It's been quite interesting. We did a survey last week and we tried to establish whether or not there actually has been a huge outflow of money from emerging markets. And actually there hasn't been as much as one might suspect post Bernanke's remarks. But of course, if Bernanke ups the rhetoric about quantitative easing, we could see more of an outflow. And if we see more of an outflow, I think investors could once again start cherry picking which emerging markets they're looking at. In South Africa, if the inflation is perceived to be running away a little bit, then we could get another period of rand depreciation.